I'm making this video to talk about the prophet Daniel. And the reason why I think it's very important to understand what the prophet Daniel is told is something that Jesus Christ mentioned to us in Matthew chapter 24. So if you go to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 15, we'll find what Jesus Christ said. Therefore, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation, as spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in a holy place, let the reader use discernment. So, Jesus Christ is not coming right out and explaining Daniel the prophet to the reader. For some reason, Jesus Christ leaves that up to us. And towards the end of the video, I'd like to suggest some reasons why there is so much mystery to the way that Jesus Christ said this. He is expecting the reader to determine what the disgusting thing is that causes desolation and where that holy place is. And yet, he does not want to come right out and tell his audience in the first century. He expects it to be understood near the end. So, in regard to this prophecy, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the large part of Christianity believe that this prophecy was fulfilled in the first century with the desolation of the brick and mortar city of Jerusalem and the temple inside of it. However, through this video, I'd like to suggest to you that this prophecy was not fulfilled in the first century and that it has absolutely nothing to do with the brick and mortar city of Jerusalem that was destroyed at that time. So now's a good time to go and look at what Daniel the prophet says. And I'd like to take you to Daniel chapter 2, where Daniel interprets a dream for King Nebuchadnezzar. And I expect my audience is very familiar with this dream and also its interpretation. And this is the dream about the immense image that eventually is crushed by a stone that's cut out of a mountain. And so I'd like to take you to that verse. It's in verse 44. And this is where Daniel gives the interpretation to King Nebuchadnezzar. So listen very carefully, as there's a couple of things in these two verses which seem to conflict with what the popular opinion is in Christianity and also with what the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society tells us in their book called Daniel. And so let's read the scripture and then I'll discuss those things which are in conflict with what almost everyone else believes. So here we go. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin. And the kingdom itself will not be passed on to any other people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms. And it itself will stand to time indefinite. For as much as you beheld that out of the mountain a stone was cut not by hands, and that it crushed the iron, the copper, the molded clay, the silver, and the gold. The grand God himself has made known to the king what is to occur after this. And the dream is reliable, and the interpretation of it is trustworthy. Now, in order for my audience to see the conflicting opinions, then what I ask you to do is discern when this event is expected to happen. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, in their published book, Daniel, tell us that this event is future. And in fact, they imply that it's very imminent. And this is very much the same kind of popular opinion that most of the rest of Christianity has. And in fact, I also agree with that opinion, that this event is future. However, I'm now asking my audience to see the conflict and use discernment when we go back to verse 44 and read it again. So let me remind you. It says, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin. And so this is the stone that crushes the feet of the immense image. So it's a good idea for the audience to consider what kingdoms in the past the God of heaven has set up, and were they brought to ruin. And so I'm sure that no one will be offended if I bring to their attention that the God of heaven did indeed set up the kingdom in Israel, and yet in the first century, with the desolation of the brick and mortar city of Jerusalem and the temple inside of it, it was indeed brought to ruin. And yet, if you agree with that, then what kingdom now exists which the God of heaven did set up? And so, if you're Christian, you're obliged to agree that approximately 2,000 years ago, the God of heaven did indeed set up another kingdom, and he did that by sending his only begotten Son to establish that kingdom and the temple inside of it. And so, are you now discerning the conflict? Here we have a stone that will crush all the previous kingdoms, including the ones that the God of heaven set up. And so, the kingdom that Jesus Christ set up approximately 2,000 years ago is called Christianity. And yet, if we expect this kingdom to be set up, then it is that kingdom which will crush all the other kingdoms, including the ones that the God of heaven set up previously. And that also means Christianity. The kingdom that will be set up in the future replaces all those other kingdoms, and this one will not be brought to ruin, suggesting that Christianity is indeed brought to ruin. Yes, the kingdom that Jesus Christ set up is brought to ruin. And so, I suspect now that some of my audience might be offended, and yet this is the reason why I bring this scripture in the context to them, so that they can discern for themselves whether this in fact is what God is saying. And so now I'd like to take you to the book of Revelation, where it gives us some more information about the kingdom that will never be brought to ruin. And so let's go now to the book of Revelation and chapter 21. Now in Revelation chapter 21, this kingdom that will never be brought to ruin is fully described. And so I invite my audience to read the entire chapter and see that this is in fact the case. However, I'd like to take you to the verse near the end of Revelation chapter 21, and perhaps we'll start in verse 22. It says there, "And I did not see a temple in it, for Jehovah God the Almighty is its temple. Also the Lamb is, and the city has no need of the sun nor of the moon to shine upon it, for the glory of God lighted it up, and its lamp was the Lamb. And the nations will walk by means of its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will not be closed at all by day, for night will not exist there. And they will bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it." And now this part is very important. "But anything not sacred, and anyone that carries on a disgusting thing and a lie will in no way enter into it. Only those written in the Lamb's scroll of life will." So did you catch that? In the kingdom that God will set up in the future, a disgusting thing will not enter into it. And so that suggests that the previous kingdom will be undermined by a disgusting thing. And what was the previous kingdom that God set up? It was Christianity that he set up using his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ. So in the future, we can expect a kingdom that will not be undermined by a disgusting thing. So now, does this help my audience discern what Daniel the prophet is explaining to us, and that Jesus Christ was telling us in Matthew chapter 24? Before I leave Revelation 21, I'd like to bring this also to your attention because it's mentioned in Daniel as well. So remember this part of the last verse, verse 27. It says, "Only those written in the Lamb's scroll of life will." So what will these people do? They will enter into it. They will be in this kingdom, the kingdom that will not be brought to ruin. So we'll go back to Daniel later on, and I'll bring this to your attention. In the meantime, what I would like to do is take you to Matthew chapter 13 and show to you how Jesus Christ explained what he would do in the conclusion of the system of things, and how he would participate in setting up the next kingdom, the one that will replace his kingdom, So here we are in Matthew chapter 13, and if we start in verse 36, we'll understand that this is what Jesus Christ asked his disciples to very carefully listen to. So listen to what Jesus Christ says. He said, "Then after dismissing the crowds, he went into the house, and his disciples came to him and said, 'Explain to us the illustration of the weeds in the field.' In response, he said, 'The sower of the fine seed is the Son of Man, Jesus Christ. The field is the Word. As for the fine seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. But the weeds are the sons of the wicked one, and the enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is a conclusion of the system of things, and the reapers are angels. Therefore, just as the weeds are collected and burned with fire, so it will be in the conclusion of the system of things." And so this is what happens in the end. The Son of Man, Jesus Christ, will send forth his angels, and they will collect out from where? From his kingdom. From Jesus Christ's kingdom. All things that cause stumbling and persons who are doing lawlessness. And so now I'd like to stop here and ask my audience whether this kingdom has been brought to ruin. Because stumbling and lawlessness are inside of this kingdom. And yet in the kingdom that will be established in the future, a disgusting thing and a lie will not enter into it. So let's continue. "And they will pitch them into the fiery furnace. There is where their weeping and the gnashing of their teeth will be." And now listen very carefully to this next part. It tells us what happens immediately after this. It says, "At that time, the righteous ones will shine as brightly as the sun in the kingdom of their Father." And so, what I would like to suggest to my audience is that this kingdom, the kingdom of their Father, is the one that will never be brought to ruin. And that this kingdom, his kingdom, is the one that Jesus Christ set up 2,000 years ago. It's the kingdom Jesus Christ established, and the Christian temple inside of it that's brought to ruin. And notice that it's the righteous ones who will be in this next kingdom. So are these righteous ones the ones that are written in the book? We'll go back to Daniel and discuss that later. But the important thing that I'm asking my audience to discern here is that there are two kingdoms being described here. His kingdom and the kingdom of their Father, the one that follows his kingdom. Now I suspect there might be some Christians who are offended at the thought that Jesus Christ's kingdom could be ruined and replaced with yet another kingdom. And so what I would like to do is ask them to use discernment once again and go back to Daniel, and this time in chapter 8. And we'll be following Jesus Christ's admonishment, reading Daniel with discernment. Now in Daniel chapter 8, this is where Daniel sees the vision of a ram and also a goat, and the horns of the ram and the horn of the goat, and the interpretation of his vision. And so if we go to Daniel, and we'll start in verse 10, and read it with discernment. This is what Daniel is told. And it kept getting greater all the way to the army of the heavens, so that it caused some of the army and some of the stars to fall to the earth. And it went trampling them down. And all the way to the prince of the army, Jesus Christ, it put on great airs. And from him, Jesus Christ, the constant feature, was taken away. In some translations, it calls this the daily sacrifice. From him, from Jesus Christ, the constant feature was taken away. And the established place, so this is something that Jesus Christ set up, the established place of his sanctuary was thrown down. It was brought to ruin. So are you discerning or reading this with discernment? What Jesus Christ established and what belongs to him is brought to ruin. It's taken away and thrown down. So if my audience is now using discernment, I hope they're now connecting all those other things back to what Daniel was told in chapter 2 about the immense image and the stone that crushes the feet of the image and all those previous kingdoms. And so that stone will also replace the kingdom that Jesus Christ established and was brought to ruin. So while I'm here in Daniel chapter 8, I would like to invite you to watch another video I made on this very chapter. However, to entice you to watch that video, I'd like to ask you a question. In the Bible, a lot of people believe that the last 2,000 years of history, the history that includes all of Christianity, is missing. Many people believe that the Bible contains a very thorough divine history of everything that happened up to the destruction of Jerusalem and the beginnings of Christianity, the first century beginnings of Christianity, and then immediately moves to what happens in the last days. And the 2,000 years in between are missing. However, I invite my audience to watch that video on Daniel 8 after this one, and you will discover that this video is describing the events that happened inside of Christianity throughout the last 2,000 years, and it's the very last iteration of Christianity that puts on great airs against Jesus Christ. Now, I've also made another video about the constant feature that was taken away from him, the daily sacrifice that was taken away from Jesus Christ. It's very important also that you watch that video that you can easily find in my channel. Now, before I leave Daniel chapter 8, I'd like to point something else out. It says here, the angel says to Daniel, "Here I am causing you to know what will occur in the final part of the denunciation, because it is for the appointed time of the end." So are we learning more now about what will happen in the end when the stone that's cut out of the mountain crushes the feet of the immense image, and the kingdom that will not be brought to ruin replaces it? That happens in the final part of the denunciation. And so it's very important to understand Daniel chapter 8. And yet, that understanding won't happen until the end. And I'd like to take you later on to Daniel chapter 12 and show you that he confirms that this will not be understood until the end. So now if you are understanding it, that is very significant. Now I'd like to quickly go back to Daniel chapter 2 and look at verse 44 again. And we'll discern something else. In verse 44, Daniel is told, "And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin, and the kingdom itself will not be passed on to any other people." Keep that in mind, that the kingdom will not be passed on to any other people, and that it will never be brought to ruin. So now understanding that Jesus Christ's kingdom, the kingdom that Jesus Christ set up, is brought to ruin, and that this kingdom that will be set up at a future date will not be passed on to any other people, then I think it's a good time to go to Matthew 21 and understand something else that Jesus Christ said. So here we go to Matthew 21, and it's in verse 43. Listen carefully to what Jesus Christ says. "This is why I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and be given to a nation producing its fruits." So, the kingdom that will be set up in the future will not be passed on to any other people, and yet Jesus Christ here is saying that the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation producing its fruits. Notice what he says next. "Also the person falling upon" what? "The stone will be shattered, and as for anyone upon whom it falls, it will pulverize him." He'll be crushed. Do you now discern the connection to Daniel chapter 2 and verse 44? The stone will crush the feet of the immense image and be replaced by a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin, and it also will not be passed to any other people. It's very important that you understand this. Now I'd like to go back to Daniel chapter 24, and we'll take a look again at the way Jesus Christ described his prophecy in verse 15, where he said, "Therefore, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation, as spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in a holy place, let the reader use discernment." Now, if you've followed along in my video and you understand what is happening to the kingdom that Jesus Christ set up, then you can empathize with his predicament. That Jesus Christ could not tell us everything we needed to know about the disgusting thing that causes desolation and where that holy place is. Because this is the kingdom that Jesus Christ set up. And so if Christians from the start understood that Christianity would be brought to ruin, then how much effort would a Christian make in trying to ensure that Christianity was a success? So understand and empathize with Jesus Christ's dilemma. Here, he tells us enough information that people living during the time of the end can discern through Daniel the prophet what's really happening to Christianity and the things that they can expect to come, and be prepared and to be awake. So, understanding this predicament, that Christianity needed every opportunity to be successful, then this cannot have been understood until the very end. And so if we go back to Daniel now, chapter 12, we'll see that this is indeed the case. And in Daniel chapter 12, it says in verse 4, "And as for you, O Daniel, make secret the words and seal up the book until the time of the end. Many will rove about, and the true knowledge will become abundant." This suggests that if the true knowledge will only become known in the time of the end, what does that say about the knowledge that's understood throughout the last 2,000 years? It means the knowledge that was understood in the last 2,000 years is not true. The true knowledge will only become known in the end. And if we can empathize with the predicament that Jesus Christ knew his kingdom would be brought to ruin, then we can see why the true knowledge could only be available in the time of the end, because Christianity needed every opportunity to be completely successful. And yet it has indeed been brought to ruin. Understanding this is very profound. And so if you do understand this, then you could be included in those who are righteous. And why do I say that? Because if we go to what Daniel is later told in verse 9 and read it with discernment, it says, "And he went on to say, Go, Daniel, because the words are made secret and sealed up until the time of the end." So we understand now why they had to be sealed up until the very time of the end. "Many will cleanse themselves and whiten themselves and be refined." And certainly if you understand the predicament of Christianity right now, there's every reason to cleanse ourselves and whiten ourselves and refine ourselves if we understand what the future is bringing when that stone crushes the feet of the immense image. And it says here, "And the wicked ones will certainly act wickedly, and no wicked ones at all will understand. But the ones having insight will understand." And so if you are understanding, you could be included in this group, the many being brought to righteousness. The ones having insight will shine like the brightness of the expanse, and those who are bringing the many to righteousness like the stars to time indefinite, even forever. And these are the ones that will be in the kingdom that will not be brought to ruin. And so these are also the ones who are written in the scroll of life, that verse I asked you to remember in Revelation chapter 21. And this is where it's described in Daniel chapter 12. "And during that time your people will escape, everyone who is found written down in the book." And so we will be living in a time of distress when that stone hits the feet of the immense image. It will be a time of distress that has not been made to occur since there came to be a nation until that time. It's the Great Tribulation. And so understand that it's Christianity that will be crushed, the kingdom that Jesus Christ himself set up. And here in Daniel 12, chapter 12, this can be confirmed again, where the man clothed in linen says this: "It will be for an appointed times and a half, and as soon as there will have been a finishing of the dashing or crushing of the power of the holy people to pieces, all these things will come to their finish." And so the kingdom will be passed on. It will be taken away and passed on to a nation producing its fruits. The kingdom will be a new kingdom that will never be brought to ruin and will no longer be passed on to any other people. The new kingdom will belong to the righteous. Now, if you are a Jehovah's Witness who's watched through this video, then I assure you many of the things that I've said fly in the face of what the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society teach to you. And yet if you did understand it, then you also could be included in those many brought to righteousness. And yet I would admonish you to watch that video that I made on Daniel chapter 8 and on the constant feature and all the videos in my channel, and very carefully prepare yourself for what is about to come, because your predicament is not a good one. In my opinion, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and the Jehovah's Witnesses are the very last iteration of Christianity. They are the ones who in Daniel chapter 8 put on great airs against Jesus Christ. They are the ones who caused some of the army and some of the stars to fall to the earth. They're the ones who put on great airs against Jesus Christ and take away from him the constant feature and throw down the established place of his sanctuary. I strongly recommend to any Jehovah's Witnesses who has understood what I've explained in this video to watch the other videos in my channel. And if you have not understood, then that's okay. Eventually, the true knowledge will become abundant, and many will be brought to righteousness.